Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's CJ Cup Byron Nelson. Gonna go through what to expect from the golf course, some of my modeling notes, the sort of key stats and metrics that I'm looking at to identify my top plays, and then afterwards, what a lot of you are here for, gonna go through the top end, middle, and lower end of the board and bring us some of my top DFS and outright bets of the week. Give you a little taste of exposure across the board. So whether it's favorites I have an eye on, some middle tier, top tier guys, some value plays, diamonds in the rough towards the bottom end of the board, you're going to get a little bit of everything here. And more importantly than just the plays that I'm getting to, it's going to give you an idea of the sort of way that I'm going through the board to identify my top plays. So whether you want to take a few aspects of my process and apply it to your own, or of course, go out there and just tail view the plays, it's all out there for yourself. So a lot to get into here. Let's start off with a look at the golf course and the sort of key stats and metrics that I'm using to identify my plays of the week. TPC Craig Ranch is an absolute birdie fest. So a few things that are always emphasized at an easier track would first off be approach play, so setting up birdie opportunities, and then the second part, probably the most important part, if we're being honest, is going out there and cashing in those birdie looks. So when we're going out there building a model for this week, approach play is going to be emphasized a lot, like we typically see for a PGA Tour event, but that putting becomes our number 2 key stat. So when we go through our modeling stuff over here, you'll see that, right? Approach number 1, putting down there at number 2. Now in terms of our proximity buckets, I'm looking a little bit more at some of this shorter range, so 50 to 125, and then the other bucket that is emphasized this week is this 200 to 225, or even this 175 to 200. All the par 3s are in these two buckets, and then a lot of your harder par 4s that are in that 470 to 500 yard range, we're also going to ask you to hit a shot there from 175 to 225. So if you're over there on the Patreon, you can get access to my exact model weightings. You'll see that these two buckets, a little bit more important than what you get for most tour events, especially these two down here. Then that 50 to 125, you also have a good amount of shorter par 4s, also par 5s, where if you're not reaching them in 2, right, you're going to have something in this bucket that I want to hone in on there as well. In terms of our putting, we have bent grass greens, so that's an added aspect that you can look at with some of your players. But over there on Bet the Number, which is one of our partners and sponsors over here on the channel, they're looking at 8 to 15 feet, and they work with tour players week in, week out, right, assessing what is important for every single golf course, and that is something that they pointed out for this week. So 8 to 15 feet putting, that's that scoring range where you're going out there and making a lot of those putts on the shorter par 4s. So maybe that is something to take a look at. Birdie or better percentage, we're at a course where the winning score might be 25, even 30 under. So you have to have the ability to go out there, make 7, 8 birdies per round. So that is even more important than off the tee and around the green, right? So typically these like tertiary stats, right, like birdie or better percentage, don't come into like number 5 or 6 out there in my modeling. I have it the whole way up there at number 3. So just know that it is a lot more important than what it typically would be if I was throwing it out there in my custom model week to week. Outside of that, off the tee is de-emphasized. I would say the same thing about around the green play, are both probably a little bit less important on a week like this. And then I'm looking at some course history and also some comp courses that we can use out there. And for comps, I've got the Houston Open, pretty similar approach profile, long course, kind of like what we have this week. And then TPC Summerlin, another birdie fest that has some longer par 4s. And from the skill set perspective, both of these are pretty on par with what we're going to get this week. So if you're going to look at other courses for some comp course history, right, take a look at the leaderboards, that sort of thing. Those are the main two events that I would keep an eye on. And I guess an added note with the Houston Open is that I think that this year was a much better example of what we can expect from this course, as they made it a little bit easier. And of course, this is a birdie fest right out there at this event. Historically, the Houston Open is a little bit more difficult. So I would say if you're going to look at anything for the Houston Open, look particularly what we had here in 2024. And I might disregard the stuff there from 2023 and prior. So with that being said, what are the sort of players that we're looking for this week? And like I said, we want guys that are good on approach, pretty solid putters, and most importantly, that can go out there and fill it up with birdies. And while Jordan Spieth hasn't had the best year here, and I haven't really talked him up at all, right, because he hasn't had the best season, I've used him as a pivot quite a bit. He's been low owned to start this year, but for some reason, Draftkings put him up there at $10,900. So he is going to be royally under-owned, right? He's way too expensive. He's not coming in with any sort of form, which might make you question why I have him as a core play, but you know, we'll talk about that here in a second. The byproduct of this price tag, and I think the reason to even have any sort of intrigue to begin with, is the lower ownership, right? If we're going to get a sub 10% owned player like Jordan Spieth, who has elite course history here, right, has nearly won this event over the last 5 seasons, well, that's something that I'm going to take a look at. So if we go up here to the course history, you'll see that he didn't play it last year, but year before that, he had his 2nd place. Year before that was a top 10, right, T9 finish. And the 2 seasons before that, where he was really struggling out there on tour, you can see it was a T29 and a T21. So consistently making the cut at this sort of golf course. And there are breadcrumbs in his shots gained profile and some of the stats out there in the PGA Tour that would tell us that Jordan Spieth isn't that far off, which first off, he's told us that himself, right? Has said that he's playing a lot better than the results have shown. And if you take a look at the birdie or better percentage, he's the number 4 player in this field, right? And that is despite having really any form of late. If we go over here to the recent form metrics, you'll see at a T39 at the signature event. That's a no cut event, so not really anything to write home about there. Masters, he got cut. Valero, a course that he's played very well at in the past, in fact, has won at. He finished T10, and then the Valspar, a course that he's been in contention at multiple times over the last few years, went out there and actually missed the cut. So despite all of that, right, if you just take a look at birdie or better percentage per round, he's a top 5 player in this field. So he's making a lot of putts. He's just mixing in way too many mistakes. And over the last few events, it's surprisingly been the around the green play that hasn't been working out. So when we take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, you're going to see a really weird stat profile for Jordan. He's gaining the most strokes off the tee, which is historically his worst shots gained profile. He's losing on approach, was a little bit better over the last 2 events. So I would say trending in the right directions with the irons at least. But most surprisingly of all, he's losing around the green, right? Losing close to half a stroke per round at the Valero Texas Open. It's why he was actually out of contention, was because of some of the real sloppy around the green shots that he hit. And over the last few events where he finished T39 at Heritage, right, he lost on Sunday alone, lost like 4 strokes around the green. At the Masters, of course, that he historically is one of the best around the green players at, right? Bled strokes there as well. There's something going on with the short game, but the other categories for Jordan Spieth, right, most notably off the tee, has been really, really good for Jordan, much better than what he's used to doing. He's still gaining a bunch with the putter, still making a bunch of birdies. It's that his normal strengths, right, approach play and around the green, which is kind of what his forte is, right? The putting can get super hot too, especially back in the day. He was a really good putter. If he can get back to his bread and butter, this is a very, very positive stat profile, right? There's a lot of potential with this kind of shots gained profile. So when you see the birdie or better stuff, you see that what he's doing off the tee and with the flat stick, it gives me a lot of hope for Jordan Spieth here. And, you know, usually you play Jordan Spieth when he's playing at one of his golf courses, right? He's a very sticky player when it comes to that course history. And I usually like to play him when he's relatively low owned, right? A super chalky Jordan Spieth is usually one that goes sideways rather quickly, but when you can get him at single digit ownership, he still has that top 5 potential out there. And because this isn't the strongest field, I don't think your 10K guy has to win this golf tournament. You know, let's say that Jason Day just finishes like T15, T20, same thing for like a Will Zalatoris. If Jordan Spieth finishes like T4 or something like that in this golf tournament, he's going to be the guy that you have to have up top, right? And maybe you don't have to have a 10K player at all. That is entirely possible. But there's also a good chance that one of these 9K guys doesn't win, right? I think that it's a relatively wide open week when it comes to the outrights. That's why you're going to see me taking outrights the whole way down there to 150 to 1 at this sort of golf tournament. But I do think that Jordan Spieth is an excellent GPP play, right? Because of the lower ownership and still with all that top end upside. So I think the reason why he's such a good play would be because he's overpriced, right? You don't really want to spend 11 grand on a Jordan Spieth, but the byproduct of that is that you can get leverage with only like taking him in 20% of lineups. So I like him there at that sort of number. In terms of an outright bet, there are no odds posted on Hard Rock yet. So if I can get him at 16 to 1, whether it's there, maybe another form of action that I can get, I'm going to try and get him there at 16 to 1. Next up, we've got Tom Kim down here at 9 grand. So Tom Kim, very popular pick for outrights already this week. So I do think that he's going to be a little bit popular. I would say cheaper than he should be at 9 grand. So that's going to contribute to people getting there. But just because one player's chalky that you're taking in your player pool is not going to be the end of the world, right? Obviously, you can take pivots with your other 5 spots. And if I'm taking a player like Jordan, who might be sub 10% owned, maybe that's just wishful thinking, right? We'll have to see where the ownership comes in by the time we come to Wednesday. But if he's going to be reasonably owned, right, Tom Kim wouldn't be a terrible second man man in. And what I really like about Tom Kim is, first off, he's won multiple times at one of my 2 comp courses, has historically been okay at the Houston Open as well. But what I really like about Tom Kim is how he played last time out, right? So if you take a look at the recent form, you can see that before the last few tournaments, it had been really sketchy, missed cut. I can tell you down there in the Florida swing did not go much better, right? Even when he made cuts, he wasn't really going out there and contending. But T30, that was at the Masters. That's decent for Tom Kim. Nothing to write home about. But this T18 at the Heritage was actually a lot better than the stats would indicate. He got stronger as the week went on, and then on Saturday and Sunday in particular, really started to turn it on. So, he got behind the 8 ball, right? It was a no-cut event, so it's not like he missed the weekend, but with that extra time over the weekend, seemingly found something. So I'm going ahead and trying to tail that. And at a golf course where it's all about just getting hot with the putter, right? Getting hot with the irons, that's kind of the Tom Kim forte, right? And if we take a look at the event history, it's been pretty solid in the small sample size as well. So last year, T34 is just okay, right, for Tom Kim, but his first start ever, right, before he was really a known prospect on the PGA Tour, went out there and finished T17. So, this is solid enough course history where we can say that this is probably a good track for Tom Kim. From the stat perspective, right, it makes a lot of sense why this would be a good golf course for him. So if we take a look at the form lately, he has not been good with the ball striking. He's been a lot better with the short game, but like I said, he's really started and round into form over the last few events. His form before that was horrible, right? It's why the shots gained metrics are as bad as they are, and I think that's why there's hope that he'll be somewhat reasonably owned. But I do think that people are going to kind of see that form from last week, right? See how he was putting up positive momentum as the week went on and try and tail that. But something like 15% ownership would still be something that I'm going to get over the field on. So, if he's coming in as one of the higher owned plays in this 9K range, top end of the 8s, by the time we get to Wednesday, maybe I'll have to reconsider playing him. But if he's going to be between 10, maybe I would say 12.5 to 15% ownership is probably a little bit more reasonable on a Tom Kim, then I'll still be getting over the field. In terms of an outright, I'm taking him at 30 to 1 if I can. Of course, like I said, no outrights available on Hard Rock yet, but in terms of the other books around the industry, it looks like 30 to 1 is a pretty fair number. So if I can get that, I'll go out there and play him. And like I said, as long as he's not 15% plus owned, is a player that I'll take for some leverage with that positive momentum. Our next play in terms of a core play is going to be the champion of 2 years ago and 3 years ago, right? So went back to back at this event. It's a TPC Lee, right? KH Lee playing at his track, the place that KH Lee built. The 2 first years that they played there, right? It was at Trinity Forest before they moved it over there to TPC Craig Ranch. He won both times. He's $8,300. He's 50 to 1 to win. And, if you played this event 50 times, I'm taking him to win more than once or twice, right? He's won twice in his first 3 starts at this event. So let's go out there and take a look at this event history. So it kind of speaks for itself, right? T50 last year was horrible compared to his other starts, but first, it was a T72 when this was the Trinity Forest event. But at this course specifically, has absolutely killed it. And, it makes sense when you think about it, right? He's a pretty solid putter, right? He's a really good iron player. Maybe not the best around the green, maybe not the best off the tee player, but those are the 2 categories that matter the least at this golf course. So, if you build a golf course for him, we call him TPC Lee for a reason. It's probably TPC Craig Ranch. And what I want to take a look at is his recent form's actually been better than most people would expect. He hasn't done anything flashy lately, but gaining off the tee, short game categories are a slight positive. Now, he had a few bad events mixed in where you can see he's losing with the shots gained approach. But if you zoom out a little bit, you get a better idea, right, for the form coming in. You can see here, right, slightly better with the approach play, right, still gaining at the other 3 categories. He's a very consistent player that for whatever reason at this golf course usually gains like 5-6 strokes approach. And if he gets back to that, right, what he did back there 2-3 years ago, he has legit winning upside at this event. We've seen it before. And frankly, for DFS, I think he's an even better play than what we have for an outright because he doesn't have to win to be optimal, right? At $8,300, a top 7 finish is what we're looking for. Heck, even a top 10 finish is probably just fine out there at $8,300. And with how many birdies this guy makes around here, in his win one year, I think he had like 32 birdies over the 4 rounds. That's the kind of DraftKings scoring that you really want to try and target. So he's a core play for me at $8,300, and at 50 to 1 is a potential outright that I would play. Before we talk through our 3 value plays, I want to remind you guys, for access to all the spreadsheets that you see throughout my content, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There's a link down down in the description of this video. On there, you can find my modeling, projections, ownership, everything that is blacked out here on the spreadsheet to go out there, download it, use it for your process. And whether that's on the optimizer, right, uploading the projections and using them for that, going out there, researching, trying to find your player pool for the week, I give you all of the information that I use for my process in a quick and easy to access format. So on here, right, you have all my modeling to choose from, which is we got the total model ranking, which is a combination of really everything to give you a taste of how good a play is overall on any given week. Got my recent form ranking, which is just, you know, over the last 12 rounds, who's playing the best golf, right? Ranks all of those players. You've got my course fit rankings, which are a longer term look at each player and how they fit a specific golf course. So it gives you an idea of which player fits this kind of week in particular. And all of that on there, we've got recent form, the event history that of course we're going through, shots gained metrics over the last 24 and 12 rounds, and the model weightings that I was mentioning before, all for access over there on the Patreon page. So check it out if you've been looking for that data, if you want all of this data to use for your own process. It does save you some time, right? That's the idea, right? This is first off how I do my research every single week. So, you know, as a pro golf DFS player, if I'm able to use it, you certainly should have all the information that you need as well. And I'm constantly adding to it, right? We're going to have the tee times added. We're going to have ownership added as the week goes on, right? My player pool is going to change as the week goes on as well. And you get all the different strategy notes from me, right? If there's going to be a weather edge, right? I talk about that over there with my Patreons. It's more than just the projections, right? You've got that. You've got the Discord that you get access to as a part of my Patreon membership. I've got the whole prop tier that I do. So if you're a golf prop player, right, I have a whole set of content out there for that as well. So make sure to check it out if you guys haven't already. I'm sure you've heard this spiel before, but again, it's what I believe is the most useful and actionable spreadsheet data source period right out there in the industry. And again, I don't give you any BS or fluff, right? It's all the stuff that you need for any given week to go out there and make those decisions, and nothing extra, right? I mean, if there are extra things you want to see, you know, you can always mention them to me and I'll try and add them to the sheet. But moving on to our value plays, first off, we got Mav McNeely, who's probably a little bit too expensive to be a value play, but I really wanted to talk him up for the sake of this video, so I bent the rules a little bit, right, and called him a value play for this week, right? Normally I look at like 8 grand below, but we're gonna pretend that $8,200 McNeely is gonna be a little bit cheaper than he is, because at 55 to 1, I think he's got legit upside to win this event. If you already saw my course breakdown video, which of course right at the end of this, you'll see a link for it show up on the screen. But my course breakdown video, he showed up in almost every single category. Now, the iron play of late has been better than usual out there for McNeely. You can see he's actually a slight positive out there in that category, but everything else is where he typically carries his game. And when I was going through some of the shots gained metrics, first off, he's much better with his longer irons than he is with some of the shorter stuff. So, you know, at this golf course where I think the defining holes are some of those longer par 4s, that's going to be helpful there. He's a really good putter in general, and on the surface bent grass is also a solid putter there too. So you like to see that for Mav in general, right? If you just take a look at the recent form, right? Some of the finishes lately, right? T58 doesn't do that much for you. This T45 doesn't. Look before that down there in the Florida swing, and the guy was posting legit top 25 finishes in some top tier fields, right? It wasn't, you know, that random BS Cognizant Classic, right, where he's going out there and posting all of his top finishes. It's some legit fields, and in some of the better fields out there in golf so far this year. So Mav McNeely has ascended, right? He's come back from that injury quite well, and it's safe to say that he's firmly back here on the PGA Tour. So, you know, you're starting to see that with the price tag. You're starting to see it with ownership, right? People are starting to play people like Mav McNeely out there. And between him and Tom Hoge last week, they would have probably played a lot better when it came to that event if either one can make any putts. And Tom Hoge, of course, can struggle with the flat stick from time to time, but Mav McNeely, right, is not used to doing that. So hopefully he can get that back on track. It's a surface that is usually pretty kind to him when it comes to the agronomy, right? Bent grass greens, some of the better greens for him out there in terms of his stats. And at $8,200, I do think that he's going to get some ownership this week, but he is priced up, or he's up there with guys that are, you know, usually he's not priced around when it comes to the Draftkings pricing. So hopefully that keeps him closer to like 15% ownership. So same thing with KH right? I don't want him to be like 20% owned. Same thing with Tom Kim, right? I don't want these guys to be mega chalky out there, but I don't imagine that anyone is going to get over that 20% mark. So again, we'll have to monitor that, right, by the time we get to Wednesday, right? Look at some of the GPP ownership numbers and make sure we're not getting anything too inflated right there. But at least as of a Monday night, it doesn't feel like he's going to be that mega chalky. And if that's going to be the case, it's going to make him solid play out there for the large field contest. Next up, we got Daniel Berger down here at 100 to 1. So this is where we start to get into long shot range. And speaking of players that are coming back from injury, Daniel Berger has not had as good a go as somebody like Mav McNeely has. But this is an event where Daniel Berger has played very well at in the past. In fact, if we take a look at the course history, you'll see that he had a 3rd place finish back there 3 years ago. So hasn't played it since, but he's been dealing with the injury stuff. And the shots gained metrics aren't that beautiful, right? If you take a look at him, he's doing his thing with the ball striking, but the putting, you can see he's losing over a stroke per round, which is not sustainable. And even if we zoom out and look at all of this year, it's pretty much the same, right? He's doing his stuff with the shots gained tee to green and then losing close to 0.7 strokes per round putting. So you have to ask yourself, do you think that Daniel Berger can snap out of it? And the answer for me is yes, right? Like now, if you're brand new to PGA DFS, you started playing like a year, maybe even a year and a half ago, you probably don't remember Daniel Berger in his prime. And maybe you're just watching golf back then, but Daniel Berger was capable of gaining half a stroke per round putting over long sample sizes, right? He wasn't the best putter on the PGA Tour, but he'd go through 2-3 month stretches where he'd go out there and he'd be top 25 in a field, maybe even top 10 in the field when it comes to the shots gained putting stats. And this shots gained tee to green, and this is all from the return, right? All of these shots gained metrics. And he's actually made just as many cuts as he's missed over this sample size. He's still gaining all these strokes of the tee to green play. Like normally we'd expect the ball striking to be the thing that comes back last, right? For a player that's returning from injury. If anything, it's been the opposite, right? And the reason why you say that, especially with like a back injury with somebody like Daniel Berger, is because you can putt, right, with a bad back, right? You get the surgery maybe a few months after you can start putting. You can't hit balls until you're fully back, right? So if anything, you'd expect it to go the putting to come back and then that ball striking, and it's been the exact opposite, right? Just to give you an example, right? Anthony Kim over there in the Live Tour is gaining like a stroke and a half putting per round in terms of his shots gained metrics on that tour, but is losing like 6 strokes in terms of his tee to green, right? That's kind of what you'd expect from somebody taking a long layoff. It's been the exact opposite. So I've been very confused all year with this whole return from Daniel Berger, and frankly, he's going to snap out of it at some point. Like, you'd have to think that somebody that's long-term a better putter than he is here is going to get it figured out. And at this golf course, right, has a near win in his course history. If he does it and he continues to hit the ball like he has recently, and I'm not saying he has to go out there and gain like 5 strokes putting. If he does, he might win the golf tournament, right? That's why I'm taking him at 100 to 1. But even if he's a neutral putter this week, right, that's easily making the cut. That's potentially a top 25 finish out there at $7,400, let alone if he goes out there and gains a stroke or 2 with the flat stick. That might be a top 10 finish out there for Daniel Berger. So he's the sort of player that I think is a lot closer to being back than what most people would look at when you're taking a look at the recent form metrics. Because if you just take a look at the finishes, right, they're not impressive, right? T50, T45, missed cut out there. The shots gained metrics are where it's a lot more impressive, right? And where you can see where the obvious issue is, right? It's the putter. He's got to figure out a way to not lose a stroke putting per round. So I'm somebody that's been following him for a while. I'm a big fan of Daniel Berger's game long-term over the last 5-6 years. And I know what he's capable of. So I'll take that shot on him. He'll for sure be lower owned in large field GPPs. So you're not going to have to worry about him being too chalky out there. And then our last play we're going to go through here, I'm getting at 150 to 1 if possible. So again, 100 to 1 on Daniel Berger is what I'm looking for, right? When Hard Rock posts that board. If I can get 150 to 1 on Sam Ryder, I will take that for an outright. And for DFS is a player that I think will get some steam, right? Maybe like 5% ownership this week, but I'm comfortable playing him in like 15 to maybe even 20%. And it's all about the birdie or better upside. If you sort it by just birdie or better percentage this year, kind of like Jordan Spieth was popping in that category, it's worth noting Tom Kim also towards the top of that. Also, who is it? Gsluke also popping in that category, kind of surprising out there for him. But Sam Ryder, another top 10 player in birdie or better percentage that is just playing a lot better for birdies than he has for his finishes. And he's the sort of player, like when we look at the shots gained metrics for Sam Ryder, like we know what we're going to get here, but I haven't looked at him all week, by the way. And I already know what we're going to see. Gaining on approach and gaining with the putting. You zoom in, it might get a little bit more noisy, right? Because we're dealing with a smaller sample, but he's probably gaining with the approach play and gaining with the putter. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening over the last 12 measured rounds too. I can just tell you that I would play him pretty much regardless of the form that he has coming in. The idea with Sam Ryder, right, is that he hits a lot of darts and he makes a lot of putts, right? Off the tee, not the best player, but this is a course where that's de-emphasized. And then the around the green play, he's usually a big negative there too, right? You can extended seat, losing 3/4 of a stroke per round. It is maybe the easiest course in terms of scrambling on the PGA Tour. You have over a 67% up and down rate at this golf course, and with the wet conditions expected this week, there's a lot of rain in the McKinney, Texas area. It's probably going to be like a 70% scrambling rate, right? So for somebody like Sam Ryder that typically can struggle in that category, doesn't have to worry about it, right? Off the tee, it's one of the more wide open courses on the PGA Tour. Like, you can't miss off the planet at this golf course, but if you're missing within reason, you'll get away with it around a TPC Craig Ranch. Those two problems are mitigated here, right? And if anything, and like I said, I literally didn't look at the shots gained metrics beforehand, and I could just tell you what he's going to do. He is eerily consistent when it comes to the shots gained metrics. So Sam Ryder at $7,000, my role with him is you play him when he's low owned out there at golf courses that fit his game. And I think you're going to get both of those this week. He definitely fits the golf course. He's definitely doing it with the shots gained metrics of late. The only X factor is whether he's low owned, right? And by low owned, I would say anything 7.5% and lower would be something that I'm willing to get over the field on. So I'm looking for 15 to 20% exposure on him. If he's going to be like 10% owned, I might have to rethink my ownership for the large field GPPs. But at 150 to 1, has that kind of upside. Like, we've seen him pop at signature events, right? Big legit fields, right? Get into contention. This is not that, right? This is a much weaker field. This is a golf course that fits his game much better than a lot of those signature events. So he has that kind of upside. So $7,000, 150 to 1, I think worth a few shots, and especially if he comes in at low ownership in those large field GPPs. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. If someone goes ahead and gives me a guess, they're going to claim that player, because if you can get the outright winner for this week, you're going to win a free month of my Patreon. And I'm going to open it up to any player. The only player that I'm going to choose that you can't take is Jordan Spieth. So you could probably guessed it, right? He's your favorite for this event. Choose anyone but Jordan Spieth to win. Be the first to put that name down there in the comments, and he's your player for this week. So go ahead, give me your thoughts down below. Smash the like button if you haven't already, and we're going to have plenty of content coming for you throughout the rest of the week. So that'll be a little live stream over there Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be going live, going over all of your questions, the weather, the ownership stuff over there Wednesday to give you an idea of some strategy, and of course our live streams throughout the weekend. So rounds 2 through 4, I do showdown live streams, also going over props for Friday through Sunday. So make sure to stay tuned for those, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of those pieces of content when they go live. I'm looking forward to this week. Should be a good one after that team wackiness that we had last week. So let's take advantage, go out there and have ourselves a week out there for the Byron Nelson. Appreciate you guys, appreciate the support here on the channel, and I'll see you guys for that live stream over there on Wednesday evening.